Hello, and welcome to the Data Protection Act 2018, What You Need to Know mini module. My name is Rebecca, and I'll be taking you through the key requirements of the DPA 2018, or UKGDPR as it's often known. In this session, we will touch on the personal data types your organisation may process, data subject rights, and how we go about upholding and exercising those rights. The session will cover the importance of recording your data processing activities, the application of legal basis, and the role of data privacy impact assessments. We will look at the role information security plays in data privacy, the requirements for LIAs, and then what actions are required when things go wrong and a breach occurs. So let's get started. The changes to data protection law are based on one basic principle: privacy by design and default. This means that services or systems your company designs, which may process personal data, must have privacy as the default. So there are things we need to think about when bringing that system or service to market. We need to consider whether your clients are required to enter their data into an online system. Does that system ensure that the personal data is private as an automatic setting? The same applies when users are required to sign up to a company website to access certain features. Usually, the company would want to add the user to their email marketing list, but they must give you the choice to opt in, as privacy is the default. That means that auto-enrollment onto the mailing list would be in contravention of the privacy by design and default requirement. So when designing a service for your customers, which requires the use of their personal data, you must consider privacy controls and settings. Privacy must be provided as the default. On this slide, you will see that there are three types of personal data: special category data, personal data, and criminal history data. The ICO are very clear about the data which falls into the special category. This data includes religious or philosophical beliefs, race and ethnic origin data, and also covers health and medical data. You will note that special category data is often what constitutes as a protected characteristic under the Equality Act. This data, if breached or used in an unauthorized way, could cause harmful effects to the individual it concerns. Those effects could be financial loss or compromise, or may even have negative effects on someone's personal life or career. This is special category personal data because it requires special considerations when we collect it, use it, share it, and even when we destroy it. Criminal history data is also quite sensitive, based on the effects it could have on someone if it is used in an unauthorized way. There are many legal and moral reasons as to why organizations must process criminal history data, but they are also responsible for its governance and security and must not use it beyond its intended purpose. Personal data, which is defined as any data which can identify a living individual, can come in many forms. It's the usual stuff like names, address, your passport or driving license, but can also include online identifiers like cookies, clicks, and IP addresses. Data can become personal data when two or more data types can be used together to identify an individual, like a customer reference number and postcode. If this data is breached, there is a chance that a malicious actor could commit fraud in someone else's name or mount phishing campaigns which appear to come from you. The full extent of how breached personal data can be used is actually quite scary. So when someone says, "Why would hackers be interested in me?" I show them this. As you can see by looking at the infographics, the value in a hacked PC or a hacked email is immense, and most people will not know about the advantages a hacker has once they have compromised your system. You may not even know they are there. Now, once a hacker has gained control of your PC, they can use it to steal any information you might have stored there, like banking and payment card data. They can use your PC as a zombie and initiate bot activities like sending spam or executing denial of service attacks. Or they can set up hostage attacks like ransomware or execute webcam image extortion, all while staying hidden. If you're logged in or you have passwords saved to your browser, a hacker can then access your social media accounts and start posting on your behalf, They may even get access to your email. Once a hacker has access to your email, they can start pretending they are you, perhaps by sending malware to your colleagues or friends and family, or even attempting to scam them out of money or payment card details. You are never the direct target, and you are never the only victim. Leaving yourself open can often lead to detrimental effects for those around you. Only with good information security management will you reduce and sometimes eliminate the risk of these attacks. As we've already seen, our personal data is subject to quite a lot of threat, and bad things can happen to us when data falls into the wrong hands. So what rights do we have? First up, privacy is a basic human right, as described in Article 8 of the Human Rights Act. We have the right to respect of our family and private life, our homes and our correspondence. This basic human right is underpinned by data subject rights. The right to be informed. This means that individuals have the right to understand what data is collected about them, how it is used, how it's protected, who it is shared with, and how long it will be retained. This information must be communicated via the company privacy policy, so there is a need to ensure that organisations understand the data they process and minimise its use wherever possible. This will help an organisation build an accurate privacy policy to meet this right. Access. Individuals have the right to request organisations disclose the data they hold about them using a subject access request, and to have it delivered to them in readable, usable format. In nearly all cases, an organisation must comply. The right to be forgotten is the right to erasure. A data subject can request that an organisation deletes the data they hold about them. This is not an absolute right, but when an organisation has no legal basis to retain the data, they must comply. Data subjects have the right to request the restriction on the use of their data or to object to its use entirely. And again, much like the right to be forgotten, there is no legal basis to reject the request. The organisation must comply. Portability. This simply means that a data subject can ask for their personal data to be transferred from one place to another. A good example of data porting is when you change from one utility provider to another. They will transfer all of the data they hold about you, including your meter readings and billing history, over to the new provider. Consent. Individuals have the right to withdraw their consent at any time, so when consent is applied as a legal basis for processing, you must make sure that if consent is withdrawn, the processing stops. It is always better when applying your legal basis for processing, you explore other legal bases first to see if any of those can be applied. The right to accountability or to complain about the way our personal data is handled is also enshrined in law. We have the right to complain directly to the organisation and to the ICO. Where we have suffered material or non-material losses as a result of an organisation breaking the law, we have the right to hold the organisation legally accountable and be compensated. Individuals also have rights in relation to automated decision-making or profiling. We have a right to know when it's happening and to object and ask for human intervention. So now we understand what rights we have as individuals and some of the threats to those rights. How do we as an organisation go about staying on the right side of the law? The first thing we need to consider is what personal data we process, where it is, and then document it. This is known as a Record of Processing Activities, or ROPA, and is directly required by the Data Protection Act. Putting this document together will help you identify the personal data types you're processing, how you're collecting it and sharing it, which then contributes towards building a transparent privacy policy. More importantly, you can start considering the risks associated with the processing. It's also a good idea to decide on and document your legal basis for processing here. Your ROPA should contain details of the systems the personal data is processed within, its touch points, and where it is located geographically, as we also have a responsibility to keep the data within the EEA unless special conditions, like the completion of a transfer impact assessment, have been completed or binding corporate rules are in place. The ROPA will help us identify high-risk areas of processing, which helps us to decide when to conduct a Data Privacy Impact Assessment, or DPIA. Additionally, the ROPA will also identify where a transfer impact assessment, TIA, or legitimate interest assessment, LIA, may be required. Once we've identified our high-risk processing, we must then conduct a DPIA. This is a risk assessment in which we identify the risks and threats to the personal data we are processing. The risks can include hackers, as we've already mentioned, but there are many more. We need to consider the physical risks, such as the loss of a device which contains personal data. We have to consider the risks that human error presents to the data, such as when an employee accidentally includes the wrong person in a confidential email, or when someone disposes of paper files in the recycling instead of the shredder. We must also be concerned with cyber risks, such as malware infections, insecure user accounts, and weak passwords. We should look at our suppliers and interconnected parties we share personal data with and decide if they present any information security risks. Those risks should be appearing in your DPIAs, along with security controls to mitigate the risk, such as antivirus software to combat malware, good training and awareness programs for employees so that they're aware of the risks they face when handling personal data. We may also want to consider encrypting our devices and networks and using strong passwords with multi-factor authentication to prevent unauthorized access. A legitimate impact assessment is a little different, and it should be conducted when you've applied a legitimate interest as your legal basis for processing. This requires you to balance the needs of the processing with data subject rights and risks. It helps you to decide if the processing can go ahead whilst mitigating risks and upholding data subject rights. Both a DPIA and an LIA must be documented and reviewed if the processing changes or new threats are identified. As we've already mentioned, individuals have the right to make a subject access request to exercise any of the listed rights. As an organisation, we have 30 days to respond to a subject access request. Again, this is where your ROPA will help. As long as we know where the personal data is processed, it will be easier for us to retrieve it or delete it should we need to. It's important to remember these key points when responding to a subject access request. A data subject is only entitled to the data we hold about them. A data subject will need to produce ID to prove that they are the subject of the data they have requested. We must provide and restrict the use of or delete personal data where we have no legal basis to reject the request. Are there third parties we share personal data with? Are they able to disclose, restrict, or delete data if we need them to? Are we storing personal data on mobile devices or in backups which might also need deleting? Are we able to stop processing if consent is withdrawn? Is the request manifestly unfounded or excessive and therefore should be rejected? To design a policy for the response and management of subject access requests is a very good idea, as this will ensure a uniform and auditable approach to subject access request management. What happens when things go wrong? As you can see from this slide, some huge fines have been handed out over the last couple of years. Let's start with Meta. Meta includes platforms you know as Facebook and Instagram. In 2021, Meta was handed 3 fines, totaling €687 million. This was failing to ensure privacy by design and default, and came about because social media profiles, by default, were set to public. This meant that users had to design their own privacy if they knew how. So when signing up to platforms like Facebook, their posts and photos were publicly available. This is a perfect example of failing to apply the privacy by default principle. Again, in 2023, Meta will find a record-breaking €1 billion for transferring personal data of Europeans to US servers. They did not conduct a TIA. Additionally, Meta have been ordered to stop US processing of EU citizens' personal data within 6 months. A very interesting case is that of Clearview. This company had been designing an AI facial recognition software and was set for big things. Only they made the error of using faces they found on the internet, from social media profiles, company websites, and more. And they did this without the knowledge or consent of the subjects of the pictures. Clearview were fined €20 million by the supervisory authorities in Greece, France, and Italy, and a further €8 million by the Irish Commissioner. Not only that, they were also banned from doing business in those countries. British Airways were issued a fine after they suffered a cyber attack. The ICO decided that the security measures in place were not sufficient. BA hadn't more than enough money in the bank to put money towards a good cyber defence programme, and they failed to do so. Marriott Hotels also suffered a cyber attack, which they failed to notice for 4 years. The attack included the theft of personal data of their customers, including unencrypted passwords. They were handed the largest fine in British history, £99 million. This was later reduced upon appeal to £18.4 million. So how can these breaches and fines be kept to a minimum or avoided altogether? Here's how. A good governance programme underpinned by good information security results in privacy. Your governance programme, you will need to consider the regulations you must comply with. This is not just the Data Protection Act 2018. It also includes regulations such as the Computer Misuse Act and e-privacy regulations. You must also include your risk management framework, performance monitoring, the application of data protection rules and audit, and of course your accountability. Information security should be considered from all angles: networks, systems, devices, people, processes, and premises security. This is a holistic approach to securing data. The best way to plan and initiate a good governance and security program is to implement a PIMS. Unfortunately, I'm not talking about the alcohol we drink on the lawn in the summer, but a personal information management system. Implementing a PIMS ensures a system which manages personal data from collection through processing and security to review and continual improvement. Your PIMS must also control the way that breaches are reported, managed, and corrected. Getting all of this in place means that the risk of suffering a breach is minimised, and even if you do suffer an ICO reportable breach, the risk of fines and prosecution are also minimised. That brings us to the end of our mini module. Thank you for watching. If you're wondering where you should start, you're looking to make improvements, or you just want to check where you are with your compliance program, get in touch with Strident and we can help guide you. We offer all manner of services to help keep your organisation compliant. You can also check out our other free mini modules to help you gain the knowledge you can use to support your compliance program. Head over to our website to find out more.